Imposter syndrome is more dangerous than you think. That feeling of, I just got lucky. I don't really deserve to be here. I got a lucky break. I don't really measure up. Well, if you ever feel that way, you're not alone. The latest research suggests that up to 85% of us struggle with imposter syndrome at one point or another. So it's normal, but it is also insidious. It can really affect your career trajectory by influencing your decisions. You think, oh, I'm not going to apply for that promotion. I'm lucky to be here. I'll just sit and wait and hope that nobody discovers me. Or I'm not going to ask for funding for my startup because, I'm not the real deal anyway. Well, I will tell you that the most successful business leaders in the world, they also have imposter syndrome, but they're aware of it and they manage it. It's one of the things that they consider a risk management tool. And in this episode, we are going to show you exactly how to do that. Now, before we get started, my name is Lisa Oake. I'm an executive counselor and a leadership coach based in Singapore. In a previous life, my other career, I was a broadcast journalist for 25 years, most of that with CNBC Asia. And on this channel, we combine broadcasting and executive mental health and bring you interviews with experts from around the world to help you manage your inner journey. So let's get to it. Our guest for this episode is a co-founder of the Imposter Syndrome Institute. She is the world's leading expert on imposter syndrome. And she says when bright people play it small, everyone loses. Please welcome to our channel, Dr. Valerie Young. Dr. Young, great to see you there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Lisa.
All right. Well, first of all, start by telling us your story, the moment that you realized that you had imposter syndrome and you wanted to dedicate your life's work to it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Lisa, I didn't even know there was a name for these feelings. And that was the aha moment for me. I was a doctoral student at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and where my mom, by the way, was a second shift custodian at the same time. And somebody brought in a paper by Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. Those are the two clinical psychologists who first coined the term the imposter phenomenon. And she's reading the paper and she's describing how all these bright, capable, competent people didn't feel that way, felt like they were fooling folks, that they were going to be found out. And I just was nodding my head like a bobblehead doll, thinking, oh my God, that's me. I looked around the room, all the other doctoral students were nodding their head. And that was my moment of realizing that I wanted to really understand what was happening. They thought it was initially something that was experienced primarily by women. So that's where my research was. I looked at women's self-limiting attitudes and behaviors that might lead to imposter syndrome.
And it applies to men as well, presumably.
Yes. Yeah. The research does show that men, for the most part, do experience imposter syndrome, but there's recent research that shows it continues to be highest amongst women.
Now, Dr. Young, what causes imposter syndrome? Is it childhood trauma? Is it a coping mechanism? Or if almost 85% of us are suffering from it, is it just a normal part of the human condition?
Yeah, the 85% is a little misleading because it doesn't take into account that people experience it on a continuum. So, if we're looking at kind of low levels or low degree of imposter feelings, then yes, but for some folks it's moderate or intense as well. So in that sense, it may be quote unquote normal because it's very common, but it doesn't mean that it's okay or it's not problematic. In terms of the sources that, a lot of people do lean into the kind of childhood trauma. Certainly, I think it's useful to look at family messages and expectations, but I'm not a big fan of, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. Not everybody identifies. There's societal reasons, which helps explain why women experience it more, as do people of color. In the US, rates are highest amongst Asian Americans. People with disabilities, anybody on the receiving end of stereotypes about competence or intelligence are going to be more susceptible. People in certain occupations are more vulnerable, in creative fields like broadcasting, right? Acting, writing. People in very information-dense, rapidly changing fields like STEM. So there's lots of reasons for imposter syndrome. Some of them are situational, societal, occupational, or even organizational culture can fuel self-doubt.
It's really interesting. You mentioned that more Asians suffer from imposter syndrome. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I'm sitting here in Singapore and it is such a go, go, go society.
Yeah, and now this research is in the U.S., although I have to say, my book is in Korean, and there's certainly a lot of people in Asian countries who experience it. In the U.S., you might be familiar with the concept, Lisa, of the model minority, right? The so-called model minority, where Asians are expected to be ever striving, ever performing, ever excelling. So researchers think it's a combination of that plus a more collective sense of success, where your success reflects on your family or perhaps your community, and expectations within the family as well.
So certainly a lot of pressure
Yes.
out there across the board. So I'm curious about the difference between people who manage it and people who don't. So when I'm interviewing really high achievers, CEOs, C-suite executives, a lot of them seem to founders as well and entrepreneurs. A lot of them seem to have recognized that they have imposter syndrome, and they actively They consider managing it part of their risk management
Mhm.
strategy. Is that something that you've encountered? Is that something that makes a difference between those who do really well and those who sort of tend to continue to play it small?
Well, everybody manages it in one way or another, right? There are these common, what Clance and I call these common coping and protecting mechanisms. Is probably at least 7. They came up with some. I've added a few, but for example, some people might manage it, as you say, like recognizing, okay, this is just a thought. Thoughts aren't reality, and they kind of intellectualize it in a way. But for other folks, they might cope with it by, I call it flying under the radar. So that's the person who doesn't speak up, doesn't go for funding, doesn't start their business, doesn't go for that promotion. For someone else, it could be the opposite. They overwork, over prepare. Now, I'm not talking about like good old fashioned hard work, right? We all have to work hard to get ahead and be successful. But for those people, it's out of the sense that I have to work harder than other people to cover up for my supposed ineptness. For someone else, it might be chronic procrastination. For students, especially doctoral students, it's never starting or finishing the degree, the book, the meeting, the business plan.
So procrastination, preparing just way too much. I'm hearing perfectionism there. So there's a link between perfectionism and imposter syndrome.
Yeah, interestingly, the research has always found a strong link between imposter syndrome and perfectionism. That said, I've spoken over 500,000 people around the world. I created an exercise where people would kind of fill in the blank. If I was really intelligent, capable, competent, I should, or I'd never, or I'd always. I'd always get it right the first time. I'd never need any help. I'd always be confident. I'd never fail, et cetera, et cetera. And I started noticing a pattern, Lisa. And the pattern was, even though everyone with imposter feelings has these distorted, unrealistic, unsustainable notions about what it means to be competent, we don't all kind of skew it the same way. So many people identify as perfectionists, but others didn't resonate. And out of that, I realized there's other competence types, if you will, competence distortions, which is a specific specific kind of cognitive distortion, is a competence distortion. So I came up with the other typologies, which is the perfectionist, but also the expert, who is the knowledge version of the perfectionist, who thinks they need to know 150% before they throw their hat to the ring or speak up. The natural genius, who measures their competence based on ease and speed. They get that new promotion, they expect to just hit the ground running, pick things up quickly. The soloist, who thinks it only counts if I do it myself, so they're not going to get coaching. They're not going to go for mentoring. They're not going to ask for advice or support, because they think if I was really competent, I wouldn't need that. And lastly is the superhuman. And that's the person who expects themselves to excel at a very high level in everything that they do. And if you don't mind, I want to tell you a quick story about a guy. I don't do a lot of coaching myself, but I did take on this male executive, very senior, who he knew, and this is we know on the one hand that we're a star, right? We know we're incredibly capable, but we're kind of balancing that with these fraudulent feelings. So he knew he was a star in his company, but the company started bringing in these younger people with their spreadsheets and their standard operating procedures, and his head's exploding, right? Because he's a big picture vision guy. So he's experiencing imposter feelings. So I said to him, you're a star, right? He said, yeah. I said, it sounds like you're expecting yourself to be the star batter, the star pitcher, the star base runner, the star outfielder, the star catcher. And the guy said, I just got it, right? I'm a sports guy. I just got it. So he thought he needed to be big picture vision and then get into the weeds with the details too. And he didn't need to.
So it's an inability to delegate that can hold you back. So imposter syndrome can play a role in that as well.
Sure. I mean, if you assume that you have to do everything yourself to count or to be competent, you have to excel at, scientific discovery and leadership, for example, then yeah, you're probably not going to delegate. That's a consequence.
You said the word unsustainable a little while ago, and that really struck me because it is unsustainable, isn't it? If you keep trying to accomplish these impossible standards and be perfect and competent at everything,
Right.
at some point you're going to crash and burn.
Yeah, and that's the thing is we know we're capable of brilliance sometimes. Right? We've all had those moments where like everything was clicking and you're on fire. And then we all have moments where the fog machine comes down and we stumble over our words, right? Perhaps in this very interview. And so if we're not over here 24/7, we kind of throw ourselves to the other end of the continuum. If I'm not brilliant, then I must be stupid.
Yeah, it's very black and white when it comes to thinking. And perfectionism's for the birds. It's just no one can keep it up forever, for sure. So, Dr. Young, what are the most effective treatments? You've had access to all of the research. You're the founder of the Imposter Syndrome Institute. What does the research tell us about how we can defeat this? How do we get over it? How do we move past it?
That's actually the biggest gap in the research. I just contributed to a book being published by the American Psychological Association, and that's what they were, hoping to be able to give folks some really empirical kind of research, and there's not. The people who are focusing on the solutions are overwhelmingly in the field of psychology, so they're looking for clinical therapeutic solutions and procedures and techniques and so on. In 1983, I came up with the first educational intervention to imposter syndrome. In my view, education is the key to unlearning imposter syndrome so we can become what I call a humble realist, somebody who is genuinely humble but has never had imposter feelings.
A humble realist. I absolutely love that. So let's expand on that a little bit. So the research, the empirical research, it's not yet to the point where it can give us concrete answers on how to get past this. So in your experience, so being a humble realist, expand on that. Tell us a little bit more about what you've seen, the mental psychological approaches that you've seen that make a difference, that move the needle on this.
Yeah, and I love that expression, move the needle, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. So I can tell you one thing that, in my view, doesn't work and is often recommended. We always tell people, make a list of your accomplishments, right? And the idea is I'm going to see everything in black and white, and I'm going to go, oh, what was I thinking? Of course, I'm confident. Well, the problem is people with imposter syndrome didn't forget that they won an Oscar or they became a senior leader in their organization. It's that we lean into our failures and our shortcomings. So it's only going to take you so far. And in my view, people with imposter syndrome don't need a pep talk. Like you've got it and you can do it and you deserve to be here, like all of which is true. But when it comes to imposter syndrome, it's not going to move the needle. If all it took was a pep talk, we would have no imposter syndrome. So in my view, it comes down to three core things. One is to normalize imposter syndrome. And that doesn't mean thinking it's okay, but doing less personalizing and more contextualizing. So for example, if I'm in a very information dense, rapidly changing field like science, technology, medicine, put my experience in perspective. If I'm the only woman or I'm the only person of color in the room, then there's that pressure to represent my entire group, or I'm a first generation professional. If I'm a student, but by definition, students are much more likely to have imposter feelings than other segments of the population. So kind of hit the pause button, zoom out, get the view from 20,000 feet, and do more contextualizing and less personalizing. Number two is to, again, it's all about, to me, like when you have that normal imposter moment, hit the pause button and become consciously aware of what is the conversation going on in my head right now. And then how would a humble realist, somebody who is genuinely humble but hasn't had imposter feelings, how would they reframe this exact same situation? Humble realists think differently, Lisa, about three very specific things. Number one, they have a realistic understanding of competence. Number two, they have a healthy response to failure, mistakes, and constructive feedback, which, let's face it, when you feel like an imposter, feels like criticism. And they understand that a certain amount of fear and self-doubt are part of the achievement journey. In other words, they don't conflate confidence and competence. So if we can, reframe those three areas, it's going to go a long way in unlearning imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that and the response to failure, that's really that hit me. That's fascinating. So tell me a little bit more about that. So what if you feel like an imposter and you're going through, say, a job loss, as so many people are now, especially in the technology industry? What would your advice be for someone who's sitting there feeling, oh, I knew this was going to happen?
Yeah, and you know what? It's never fun to fail, or not get the job or blow the big presentation or whatever it might be. And I always tell people you could be crushingly disappointed, but not ashamed as long as you gave it your best shot. I think we need to look at failure, Lisa, the way we do with sports. We understand with sports, somebody's going to win and somebody's going to be crying on the bench, right? And what does the person who loses do? They don't hang up their uniform and go home. They go watch the game tape to see, how do I improve next time? They get more coaching. They practice more, and they say, we'll get them next time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how people get to the Olympics, isn't it? They don't give up. They just keep
Yeah,
going.
I mean, it's kind of like thinking as an actor that you're going to win the Academy Award for every single role that you take. You're not going to get every job. Every project isn't going to be flawless. You're going to make mistakes, and it's all about, kind of failure analysis and moving forward and figuring out, how can I do it better, differently? What did I learn? And moving on.
Yeah, yeah. Be a little bit easier on yourself is so important, isn't it?
This guy in my local town, he ran for election. He'd been on this local board for like 12 years. He ran for election again, and he wasn't elected. So you think he'd be, really disappointed and upset. Well, no, the very next day he took out papers to run for a state office, like the next highest level. And the quote in the newspaper, he said it was the next natural move. And I remember thinking, that's not intuitive to a lot of people, that the next natural move in response to failure is to shoot higher. But I thought, but why not? He just
Love
lost the election. He'll try again. He'll go for a bigger election next time.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. Dr. Young, any final bits of wisdom, pieces of advice that you'd like to leave our viewers with today?
I would. And the advice is, so many of us, we put a lot of focus on feeling different, on not feeling like an imposter, on feeling more confident. And the reality is that feelings are the last to change. And in my view, the only way to stop feeling like an imposter is to stop thinking like an imposter.
Dr. Valerie Young, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you on the show. Now, if you want to learn more, you can check out Dr. Young's book, The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women and Men: Why Capable People Suffer from Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It. The link to the book is going to be in the description below, as well as a link to the Imposter Syndrome Institute and to Dr. Young's absolutely amazing TED Talk. You have to watch it. It's brilliant. Thanks for watching.